Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am with Eric McNulty, and we are going to have a discussion and talk a little bit about, and I'm going to get to pick his brain about leadership, meta leadership, and how we can build our leadership skills as a practitioners, as professionals, in what it is that we do every day in emergency management. But wherever you may sit, you may not be working in emergency management. It could be public safety in general, or it could be even business, and how we apply the skills of communication and leadership is extremely important. So, Eric, thank you so much for giving me your time to talk this morning and talk about, because you've written a book on meta leadership, and that application was mainly targeted toward emergency management, but leadership in general can be applied wherever you want to be apply it, as long as you're consistent in which way you apply leadership. And you've made a very good point early on about being the leader and how the leader applies it. So let's talk about how we can, as an individual, improve upon our skills.
Well, thanks, Dan. It's great to be with you, and you're talking about my favorite subject. So this is great to be able to do this with you. And I always counsel people to study leadership and practice leading, right? Noun, verb, and that the practice of leading is something you need to do. You can do every day. It's about the human factors. It's about bringing people together, uniting them for a purpose. To achieve objectives. It's about resolving conflict, building collaboration. It's about understanding what motivates you and motivates others. It's about your behaviors, your decisions, and your actions. That's not dependent upon your role or your rank. In fact, one of the things we do in our programs is we ask people to think about a person they thought of as a great leader and someone that they had known, not just not of a historical figure, but someone they've known who was a not so great leader. And the responses we get back are universally what people do and who they are. It's their character. It's how they apply their principles and their values to their everyday interactions. So it's not about what school they went to or how tall they are or how fancy their car is or any of that stuff. It's about who you are and what you do. And so again, that's something you can be working on daily, no matter what role you have, no matter how old you are, how early or how late you are in your profession. To me, it's a lifelong journey of mastery to which you never quite get to the end. You can always get better. I remember a conversation with Thad Allen, former commandant of the Coast Guard. And this is when he was commandant. He was still really curious about how he could be a better leader. Now, he's one of the best leaders I've ever known. He had 4 stars on his shoulder. He had a career of amazing accomplishments. Yet he was still curious about, how do I better understand people? How do I better do this job of leading? And I think it's a good attitude for people to carry forward, is that none of us is perfect at this. You may have been born with certain advantages or disadvantages, but you can always improve and get better. And a lot of it is about being intentional, being disciplined, and putting the work into understanding who you are and making sure that what you do is consistent with those core values and principles.
Well, I think too, a lot of it is the way leadership in general is viewed, and some people have a misconception of what leadership really is. And you see someone who says, "Oh, they're a natural leader." Well, that may not be true. They may just be more assertive, and they may be more vocal, and they may be more outgoing, but they does not necessarily make them a great leader. Ultimately, they may very well be a great leader, and those can be some very great traits for a leader. But there's an aspect of leadership that I think that you don't have to be the most vocal and the most assertive and aggressive in order to be what is considered a leader, especially when it comes to emergency management. I mean, emergency management, as we've talked about multiple times, and everybody knows this, is we are not necessarily in positions of authority, but we have to lead and influence people who are in positions of authority, and we have to lead in all different directions. And this is an area in which I think, and this is my opinion, that we're not doing our best at as practitioners, as individuals who are in the field doing that. They were not aggressively enough. And there's times when, and you say introvert, extrovert. I'm myself an ambivert. I'm an introvert who can be extroverted when I need to be, but I'm not one who goes out of my way usually to be seen and very engaging, and I'm all over the place. I'm usually not that guy. I can be when the time calls for it, but in my job, I've taken on that role as an emergency manager. An emergency manager is not an introverted in their office. They are an extroverted, engaging, building up their community, understanding their organization, understanding the people they work with. They're collaborating, networking, which is one of the biggest things that you really hit on in your book, is about collaborating, networking, and building those relationships and inviting people in and offering your services. And that's a huge part of what I love about emergency management as the profession in general. It's one of the things I love about it so much is that it's one of the most collaborative and networking professions that there are that I've found. And we talked about the application of leadership, but as an individual, how do you feel the view of it can change, or that we can change those who may view leadership as authority or an outgoing, aggressive presence?
Well, really great point you make there, Dan. And I think that often we think of those most dramatic moments when that assertive, strong person comes to the fore. That is one piece of leadership. I mean, I think leading is very contextual. So you have to understand what's the situation, what's going on around you, and does this call for that assertive, strong personality, or actually does it call for someone who can take some time to think things through, to see them clearly, not make a rash decision, to make sure everybody is included in a conversation. That may be how you lead. Although we often go to the extroverted personality as someone to see, oh yeah, they're the leader. Your secret weapon when leading are these two things on the side of your head. It's actually being able to listen, actively listen, to really hear people, to really get the sense of what's going on, to develop a sense for the frequencies in an organization or in a situation, to know what's needed, and then be able to adapt yourself. I call this behavioral negotiation. And it's not about being inauthentic, because I think you have to be real. That's one of the things that again comes across over and over again when we ask people about those they know who they think are leaders worth following. It is that they're authentic and they're real. But within being real, we show different facets of ourselves to different people. Chances are you're a little bit different with your in-laws, for example, than you are with your college buddies, right? You adjust your behavior a little bit for the situation. The same is true in leading. You're still going to be you, but you need to be able to adapt yourself to the situation. And again, when we need that strong presence who's going to get up and either battle for a certain point, or stand up to somebody who's going to do the wrong thing. Yeah, you got to be ready to do that. When there are times when it's, we need to convene stakeholders in the community and just shut up and listen for a while and take really good notes. You need to be able to do that too. So a lot of it is about being able to build trust, to get people's confidence, and to be able to be adaptable, to know who you need to be, which facets of yourself you need to pull forward at any given time that help you be the person others look to and want to follow.
Well, yeah, and I say all the time that leadership itself is influence, and influence comes from time and consistency. It comes from trust. So
Right.
trust is built over time and consistent behavior, and you're not hiding who you are, and you are, to use your words, authentic in who it is that you are. You're not pretending to be anybody else. You're and I'd like to really touch on your comment about active listening. That in itself is huge, because most of the time the best decisions are made out of listening to and actively listening. That's the key word. Actively listen, taking the time to really dissect it, understand it, know where people are coming from, understanding that whole situation, so that you can make a better informed decision, or intentionally communicate back what it is that you are feeling around their thoughts and their understanding of the situation. Sometimes the worst things that take place between people are misunderstandings, miscommunication, versus what I thought you said versus what you said actually meant behind that, and then taking the time to really understand it. And in that active listening too, there's a big part of that about being able to repeat it back to somebody in a way that says, I heard what you said, I understood what you said, now let's talk about what you said. So but that's one of those areas that I feel we truly need to really hold on to and really take advantage of as emergency managers, as leaders. We're leaders within. I mean, people look to you for leadership, whether you want to be a leader or not. Simon Sinek, he says some of the best in one of the best ways is that not everybody wants to be a leader. Mm-hmm. Not everybody should be a leader, but everybody can be a leader. And if you take the time to really learn it, be it, and communicate that, you can be a great leader. Or if you don't want to be a leader, then you need to remove yourself from situations in which you may be looked upon to lead. So these are big, decisions that we have to make as individuals. And I feel like a lot of the weight is on us as individuals to really step up to push the profession and the professionals forward. I mean, I can only get better if I want to. So,
Right.
so where do we land on that? How do we push the professional? I mean, we have a lot of stubborn people in our profession, and they feel they know everything, or they feel they don't need anything else, or that's not for them. So how do we overcome these objections?
Well, I think a couple of things that you mentioned trigger some thoughts for me. One is that when we think of leading as behaviors as opposed to role or rank, it's something you can step in and out of. So, I go back to, prior to doing this, I was at a different part of Harvard and I actually produced conferences. And I spent a fair bit of time on stage. Now, when I stepped on stage to MC an event or to interview someone, I turned over leadership to someone who worked for me. I was now following her cues. If she told me to do something, I was going to go do it, because I was no longer in a position to see the whole incident or the whole event and know what was going on. I trusted her. So I let her lead. Doesn't mean I gave up my authority. It doesn't mean that I now worked for her. It means for the next 2 or 3 hours, I'm following her direction. And again, we separate these things a bit. It's important. So I think if leading gets tied too closely to your formal authority, it gets too concentrated, and then you actually lose your own ability to lead, and you lose your ability to develop others to lead, and have people who are more appropriate in a given situation lead to get the best possible outcome. And the other piece about the authority versus influence that you mentioned is that when you over rely on your authority, your formal authority, often you can wind up with a fear-based environment. Humans do not operate well in a fear-based environment. It's not our best. We're not doing good neuroprocessing. We're in defensive posture, bad chemicals happening in the brain, all kinds of bad stuff happens. And in study after study of what makes effective teams and effective organizations, this notion of psychological safety. My colleague Amy Edmondson at the business school was the first one to give the term to it. But this notion that you create an environment where people feel safe to take interpersonal risk. So, you can be, you're tough on ideas, but you're easy on people. You use mistakes as learning opportunities. You keep people out of that fear-based state. And this is important, even for those with great authority. You want people out of that fear-based state because they will do a better job. Edmondson's research actually shows that when you're in an environment where you can talk about mistakes, you make fewer mistakes. Isn't fewer mistakes what you want? Yes. So use them as opportunities for learning. Let people talk about them. Let people admit them. Obviously, you don't want to have a high tolerance for really high consequence mistakes, when lives are on the line. But a lot of low-level mistakes, use those as opportunities to grow. And so I think if you're someone who wants to lead, you put yourself in service to that group you're leading and trying to get to that best possible outcome. So yes, it's about you, but it's also really about them. It's a different way of looking at it. The leaders I see who fail in this field and in related fields is ones who think it's all about them. They feel like they always have to be strong, always have to be the authority, always have to have all the answers. It's really, really limiting, because you need all the contributions and the perspectives of all those other people. You need an environment. People will still see you as strong. They'll respect you. They'll follow your authority when they need to, but they'll follow you willingly because you're creating an environment where they feel like they can contribute to the highest extent of their abilities.
So psychological safety, that's an amazing term. I think it's beautiful. I think I want to start using that. And it's very important. And that's one of those things that you touched on briefly, and I'd like to go a little bit deeper into it, especially with the program that you run in leadership at Harvard. And when people come into the classroom, I mean, ego plays a big part in, especially when it comes to levels of authority. I mean, when you're dealing with chiefs and deputy chiefs and mayors and city councilmen, or captains, even down in wherever you may rely, whatever organization they're coming from, military even, it could be, ego could play a part when it comes to rank. And when it comes to going into and being, and I've started talking about vulnerability, and it's having that permission, but also the willingness to be vulnerable in those areas. And a lot of that comes from ego, being letting go of your ego, letting go of that bit. So how do you overcome that when it comes to inviting people to say, listen, rank isn't going to matter right now. We're talking about leading. Your rank and your authority doesn't really matter right now. So how do you overcome that mindset?
Well, it's one of the, I think, the great blessings we have in our program at Harvard and through our executive education program is the people who are on the faculty alongside me and the guest speakers we bring in. So I mentioned Pete Gaynor earlier. We just in June had former Governor Deval Patrick, who was governor of Massachusetts during the marathon bombings. We've had, and on the faculty, Rich Serino, who was deputy administrator of FEMA, and Cronenberg, who ran emergency management in San Francisco for a long time, and others who are at that very senior level who come in and talk about the time they didn't know what to do, the time they were scared, the time they were just like, oh, this is not going to go well, and then how they figured it out. And often that was by listening. It was by, having a junior person step up and say, hey, boss, you're missing this. Why don't you look over here? Have people actually who've been through it in the field, because again, we have found the people who are most successful over a long career have figured out some of these skills, and having them talk about it. So when you have somebody who is, reporting up, briefing the president and is like, not quite sure what I'm going to tell him, but okay, let's listen, figure out what he's looking for. And then we could, and then understanding how you do this and sharing those real world experiences is a big thing. And then, again, having that environment is why I love being back face to face for executive education now. If you have 50 people in a room and we're talking about emotional intelligence or talking about vulnerability, you get one or two brave folks who start the conversation and they open up, and then others follow. And we just did one of our last in-person before COVID, we did a big thing about vulnerability and emotional intelligence. I remember one police commissioner said to me afterwards, thank you for creating a place where we could talk about this stuff, because I don't get anywhere else to be able to really share what's going on. And they were talking about burnout then. We know we're really talking about burnout now, but to be able to just talk about those things. That's why I think one of the great benefits of whether it's our program or another program, getting together with peers and being able to share like experiences and be able to talk about the hard stuff. And you begin to see, oh, that person I really admire and successful, there are times they don't quite know what's going on either, or there's times that they're scared. That gives you the freedom to then say, you know what, I can do that too. And so that's really how it's built. It's not me, lecturing here the 4 principles of whatever, but it is from my experience and the experience of others saying, this is how you build that persona, that set of skills that make you truly a leader, not just someone who's been labeled a leader.
And that's a great point, and that's really good for our mental health as well. That's why we do debriefs and hot wash, depending on what profession you're in. But that's why we do after action reviews and stuff, so we can really express those things. But having the willingness to do that, and then the permission. I mean, a lot of people, like you said, they didn't feel they had the permission to do that anywhere. But that more than just that makes them feel great. But for the others that you're around and the community that you're around, that humanizes you. That ultimately builds more communication, more open communication with people, builds more rapport with people, which builds stronger relationships, which it just continues to compound. The interest that you get off of that investment of opening up is invaluable. It's invaluable. You can't put a price on that. It's invaluable. So where do you, as an individual, and I'm just asking you to talk to the individual now, because that's where I feel like we're going to make the greatest influence, not only on emergency management, the profession, is by the individual stepping up. What would your advice be to that individual to say, it's okay to show vulnerability. It's okay to open up. It's okay to not be strong all the time.
So I think the place I would start, first of all, is that I always advise our students, I do it myself, is to keep a journal, so you at least can admit it to yourself. It doesn't have to be prosaic. This is for you, not for anybody else. Just writing down kind of here's what went well today. Here's what could have gone better. Here's the question I wish I had figured out ahead of time or I didn't have the answer to. And beginning to admit it to yourself that way is one thing. And then doing it with a group will be really, really scary the first time. It will, because if you're used to being the person with all the answers. But what you can say, and here's the thing, the trick is to admit the vulnerability while still having confidence you'll overcome the vulnerability. So you can say to your group, I'm not quite sure what we're going to do here, but I have great confidence we're going to figure it out. Invite them in so you can say, okay, I don't have the answer right now. Let's look at what do we know, what don't we know, how are we going to close that gap, what's really urgent, what maybe are the questions coming next. And but when you express confidence in that group and you invite them in to help you solve it, they will jump in, they will help you solve it. And because you've helped that. And so again, you're able to be vulnerable, yet strong enough to admit you're vulnerable. This is the thing, when I talk to people who come from the background where they really want to be a strong presence, the strongest people are able to admit some vulnerability because they know it isn't about, you're fragile if you can never admit vulnerability. So it's actually a sign of strength, and people will trust you more because now, as you say, it humanizes you. It shows that you're willing to take suggestions from other people. You're willing to hear hard truths, and that's a really strong leader, not a weak one.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because I actually want to revise my previous statement. And ultimately, it maybe my words saying strong, put on a strong presence, I should say.
Yeah.
Because some of the strongest people I know are the most vulnerable, most willingness to say, tell you why, share with you a story of reasons when they went wrong, or things that they feel they're inadequate at, or in general, what they may be feeling in that moment. Our mental health depends on our ability to do that. And in mental health in general right now, which is great, is a big topic of across all areas of discussion and growth, is not being labeled in any way, but having that permission, as you said, to just, even in a group, it's hard to do, but if you're going to do it to yourself, I journal every day, and it is not easy for me to say to people that I'm having difficulty with something or whatever, but I have the willingness to do it, and then doing it is a big step for anybody. And some of the strongest people I know are the most vulnerable people, and that doesn't make them weak. It makes them stronger. It humanizes them in a way that makes you look at them with that much more admiration. I mean, you really do. You will follow them even more. And you build that rapport too, because they trust you enough to open up to you.
Right.
So that's a lesson there, is that if someone's trusting you enough to open up to you and be vulnerable, don't take that for granted. That is a huge empowerment to you, or trust that you can influence them, and they're ultimately letting you know that, hey, it's okay for you to be vulnerable with me as well, because that trust and rapport just continues to get stronger. So I really appreciate that point of view in moving forward, because I think vulnerability is one of those areas, especially for me. I'm going to take ownership of this. It's one of the most difficult, because
right.
you got to be able to admit that, listen, I don't know. Like, I don't know, but I'm working on it, or I messed up. Can you help me? Can you help me fix it? So having that willingness, but like you said, like, that comes from trust. And sometimes we don't always have the strongest trust nurturing environments that we work in, and we have to, as the individual, turn around and try and fix that. And I think people, and this is nothing against, because I'm a big proponent of your program, a big proponent of IAEM, I'm a big proponent of theme, but they're not going to fix our profession. They're not going to fix the profession. The individual making the choice is what's going to fix the profession and the industry. And that's a big step in which I don't think a lot of people are ready for yet. Where are you on that?
So I think that it's a really good point, and I do think that actually it's individuals, but it is also the collective. And I think that one of the things that we have to look across the profession is how people can be there as resources for each other, so that having that network of somebody you can call in a different state or a different city who may have seen something similar to what you've seen, just to say, boy, I just had the crappiest briefing to the governor, and I messed it all up. And somebody you can call, you can trust, you can be open with, who can say, you know what, yeah, you did, I've done that too, and let's talk about how you can do it better tomorrow, and get you back up. But having that as a peerage, that connection, is, the research increasingly shows that we build resilience not one individual at a time, but by having people who take care of each other, support each other, that builds more resilient individuals. And so I do think if the profession can embrace leading as something you can develop over time and something worth investing in alongside your technical skills and your management skills. That's really important. And then building these networks. And then there are a lot of strong networks in this profession, which is great. One of the things we saw in the Boston Marathon bombing response, with swarm leadership, we called it, the whole foundation was trust-based relationship across sectors, across jurisdictions, because people had spent a decade before that training together, working together, solving problems together, and building that trust. And I think organizations like IAM and others, one of the most valuable functions they can serve is connecting people in ways so they actually, in building true connections, not just like at your business card or, I'll see you next year in Grand Rapids, but actually being able to be resources for each other and help for each other. And one of the things we're doing at the MPLI, starting in December with our next iteration of our flagship Exec Ed program, is going to be introducing peer learning groups. So in between 2 residential sessions, you'll spend 3 months working in a small group, 5 or 6 people, just working on real world issues. You bring the issues, you decide what they are, but having that group you can talk about it with, learn from their experience, guided by a faculty member. But it's going to be very much trying to build that psychologically safe space where you can, because you're right. I think this profession, its next stage of growth is going to be very much on the human side. Get a lot of great people who do a lot of great work, but there's still opportunity there to grow. And I think this is one of the places where it's really got great potential.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because we've been, we come out of civil defense, and most people, we're older than civil defense, emergency management in general is, but I keep hearing that emergency management is still in its infancy. Well, at this point, we're baby Yoda. Like we're 50, but I mean, come on, it's time for us to start growing, experiencing those growing pains, start trying to walk. We're going to fall down, but get right back up again. And we need to come out of our infancy. We need to start in our growth and basically start trying to walk. And we're going to stumble, but we have that support network, as you're talking about. We can do some great things for, not only for, I mean, just us as individuals doing our jobs, but there are people at large scales that can depend on what it is that we do every day. But as an individual, the growth that we intentionally take place, or make our decisions to intentionally make those growth decisions is huge for us. And I think and this is the last area I'd like to talk to you about and get your the importance of, for me anyway. I feel like consistency in general is not where it should be, and I feel like that falls upon. There's so many different angles in consistency, right? I could be very consistent with my leadership if the turnover there is very inconsistent. I can't. It's hard for me to get my job done, right? So where are we in our application and understanding of consistency in the way we apply being a leader?
Well, I think, again, a great point you raised, and it's a really interesting one, in that it's knowing when to be consistent and when to deviate from that. So I think we've built a lot of consistency into structures and procedures, and we know how ICS is set up, and you can plug and play people into technical roles, into functional roles, and that's really, really good. There's a lot of benefits to that. I think I think the consistency as a leader is important, but it doesn't mean there isn't variability. So I need to know that the basic Dan Scott that I know, when I walk into the room, I'm going to get some variation on that basic Dan Scott. Or you're not going to be a crazy person one day and super soft the next day, but there's going to be some consistency there. So I think you need to be predictable to your people within that, and I think you need to be very intentional about how you want to be predictable. So if you want to people to be comfortable bringing you bad news and difficult truths you really need to hear, you've got to be consistent in not punishing them for doing so, right? You would be intentional about, okay, you just gave me the worst news I've heard all year, and I'm not going to yell at you. I may have to excuse myself to go pound on a wall for a minute, but okay, I'm gonna handle this in a way that preserves our relationship. And I think if you're consistent and always thinking about, how do I build relationships? How do I nurture that community within your team, within your larger network? That's really important, and finding ways to do that. And then again, there are times when I've seen really people who are typically very, very strong decide to express vulnerability. They can do that, and again, in an intentional way, in a way that they know. And this isn't about being false; it's about being smart. Reveal it in a way that is that keeps the human factor, keeps those relationships, and makes you more human. Um, and so, and I've seen this again with, like, CEOs who have a very serious illness. How do you admit that to your organization? What does that make you? How do people now see you differently? Um, Most often, again, when people will rally around you, that's when you'll see what kind of relationships you've built. And so, I think we want to be aware of rigidity and realize consistency is generally good. Know when to be variable, and also avoid the rigidity of, this is how we've always done it. This is how I've always done it. Therefore, I'm going to keep doing it exactly this way. No, we live in fast evolving times, a lot of changes around us. And so, being able to moderate your behavior, be able to regulate your emotions, that you want to be consistent about, and be very intentional about how you're doing it. We did research, which I'm happy to share with folks, around what were the best leader behaviors in an ICS environment, that improve team performance, and which are the ones that degraded team performance. Everybody had seen them, a lot of consistency, but right up there at the top were confidence and the ability to remain calm and regulate emotions. And then came communicate well and make decisions and things like that. But that ability to, again, the human piece of understanding who you are and how to operate under stress, those were critically important. The stuff around, again, so some of the sort of procedural stuff, not so important. It's who you are as a human.
I 100% agree, and I think the best leaders are loved, not feared, and
Yes.
that's a huge aspect of being a great leader. But leadership is service. So your intent is to serve others, is to lift others up, is to build others up, and if that's truly evident, you're going to be you're going to be loved. You're not going to be feared in what you're doing. As you said, if someone gives me bad news and I fly off the handle, then they're going to be afraid to do that again. So also that brings that sense of them not feeling safe, like you said, the psychological safety, but also having the trust to know that they can share with me without me flying off the handle. So yeah, that's a huge aspect of
And I think an important thing to what you just said, Dan, you can be that leader who is loved and respected and trusted. Doesn't mean you can't be tough. Doesn't mean you don't have high standards for accountability. Doesn't mean that you're a squishy, soft person. It just means people know who they're getting. They know what your standards are, and you're invested in them. You've got those standards, and that toughness is really about them, not necessarily about defensive for you, but it's about investing in, hey, how do I have the best team possible that can achieve these mission critical objectives? Because as you said earlier, if we don't, people die, property gets damaged. The mission here is really important. So you can still be, you don't have to be a soft, squishy person to do this. You just need to know why you're doing it and be very intentional about how you do it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like parenting. You ultimately, your kids, you love your kids, they love you. And sometimes you got to be a disciplinarian. Sometimes you're hugging and kissing on them. So it all depends on the situation, but they know at the end of the day, even if they got in trouble, even if there's some discipline there, that you have their best interest at heart. You love them. So, but for me, that's the way it is. I'm a person of service in general, and I feel like that's the aspect in which I want to make sure that everybody knows about me, is that I'm here to serve. And I'm actually I'm pivoting right now, and I haven't expressed this to you yet, so this is news to you. But I'm actually in the process of pivoting from being the emergency manager that serves a community to a professional that serves the emergency manager. My goal is to serve the server, to protect the protector. So I'm pivoting to more of that role, and it's in process. It hasn't, I haven't done it like 100% yet, but it's in process. And I feel like everybody's, but my calling is still the same, is emergency management and leadership. I love them. I love those two subjects with all my heart. And not too many people can just walk in and say, I love what I do. And I do. And my encouragement to people is really find that passion to really love what you do, whatever it is. Love what you do. If you don't love it, you don't have passion for it, why are you doing it?
Right.
Find something else. So that's find what you're passionate about and go for it. So and I with you, the leadership that you instill, the product that you put with the You're It is amazing. I appreciate that book very much. I appreciate you giving me your time today, which, as I said to everybody, your time is the most valuable resource you have. And I appreciate you giving me some today. I'll just give you the last words to say goodbye, share where people can find you, and then I will be also sharing your contact information and any resources you might want to share with the audience in the notes.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for the time everyone's taken to listen to and watch this conversation we've had, because I truly appreciate the people in this profession. You do amazing work, and it's our goal to just help you do it a little bit better, to accelerate your journey, because you can serve our communities better. And so it's been a pleasure. You can find more about the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative at npli.sph.harvard.edu. You can find me at McNulty at hsph.harvard.edu. Easy to find on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter at Harvard NPLI is the official account, and at Richard Earth is my personal account. And we hope to see you in one of our programs, either online or in person, or when we're gallivanting about doing talks at various conferences and things. Really hope we get to connect. And thank you, Dan, for saying such fine words about the book, You're It, Crisis Change and How to Lead When It Matters Most. We really wrote that because we wanted to reach a much broader community and help people learn from the stories, see the tools and techniques and the thinking behind it, because we're in crazy times and we really need emergency managers more than ever, and those who are at the top of their game. And so, again, if we can be a small accelerant to people's journeys, that's why we do what we do.
Well, thank you very much. And everybody who's watching, listening, take the time to comment, share, give us your feedback. My goal here is for us to get better and for us to get better together. I'm Dan Scott, and I'll talk to you next time.